All right, today we are diving deep into one of the most intense and honestly dramatic stories you'll ever find. Genesis chapter 6. You've got a world that has become so corrupt that its own creator decides to just hit the reset button. And then there's the one guy chosen to build a boat and ride out the storm. Let's get right into it. I mean, wow. The story just kicks off with this incredibly bleak assessment. It really doesn't get much darker than that, does it? This one line sets the stage perfectly. We're not just talking about a few bad apples here. This is describing a deep, fundamental corruption at the very core of humanity. And that leads us to the huge question that really frames this entire story. What could possibly happen that would push a creator to the point of destroying the very thing they made? See, this isn't just a tale about a big flood. It's a deep dive into divine justice, sorrow, and, well, a creator's breaking point. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around the flood, we need to zoom out a little. This whole thing didn't just happen out of the blue. It was actually the climax of a long, slow downward spiral. You can pretty much trace the decline across 10 generations, all the way from Adam to Noah. It starts with one broken rule and getting kicked out of Eden. But then, bam, just one generation later, we have the very first murder. Fast forward to Noah's time, and the world is just completely consumed by violence and corruption. It's a steady decay. Now let's zoom in on one of the most debated and, frankly, mysterious parts of this entire chapter. Right before the flood, the text mentions this group called the Nephilim. And what's wild is how little the text actually says about them. It just kind of notes that they were there, on Earth, as part of this corrupt landscape. They're almost presented as another symptom of how bad things had gotten, mentioned right alongside humanity's general wickedness. And this, of course, is where everyone's imagination just goes wild. The text leaves it totally open, which has sparked centuries of debate. Were they giants? Some kind of divine offspring? Maybe ancient heroes? The story never gives us a straight answer, which just adds this extra layer of deep mystery to an already intense narrative. So you've got this world that's in a state of absolute chaos and corruption. And at this point, the story pivots from just describing the problem to detailing the divine reaction. And let me tell you, it is drastic. The cause is laid out pretty plainly. The level of sin and violence had just reached a tipping point. It had gotten out of control. That was the fundamental issue that was going to trigger such an extreme solution. But here's what's so crucial to get. The motivation here isn't described as just pure anger. Instead, the text really emphasizes this deep sorrow, this regret that the creation, which was supposed to be so good, had become so twisted. It's more about heartbreak than just rage. So the divine plan that comes out of all this basically has three parts. First, the decision to just wipe the slate clean. Second, the method, a massive, catastrophic flood. And third, the ultimate goal, to cleanse and purify a creation that had just gone so wrong. Just when the story hits its absolute darkest point, this little glimmer of hope appears. In the middle of all that corruption, there's one person who stands apart, and his name is Noah. The text draws this incredibly stark contrast. On one side, you have the entire world, violent, corrupt, sinful. And on the other side, you just have Noah, described as righteous and blameless. He's the exception. And that's the whole key. He is the one exception that makes survival even possible. So Noah gets this monumental, almost unbelievable task. He has to build a massive ark, get his family on board, and then collect a male and female of every single living creature to preserve life. He literally becomes the vessel for the future of everything. No pressure, right? Now this is where we get to peel back a really interesting layer. We tend to think of these ancient texts as being set in stone, but they were often more like living documents. And different ancient versions of Genesis tell this flood story with some subtle but really fascinating differences. So check this out. The Hebrew text that we're most familiar with, the Masoretic text, lays out a flood that lasts about 378 days. But if you look at an older Greek translation, the Septuagint, the dates are slightly tweaked. The flood starts 10 days later, the mountains appear a month later. So why? Well, scholars think the translators were actually adjusting the numbers to make the whole event fit into exactly one symbolic year. It's a small change, but it shows you how people were actively shaping the story. All right, so let's zoom out one last time to really understand the big picture here.
This massive flood isn't just an ending, it's a major turning point. You could call it the Great Reset for the entire world. The first 11 chapters of Genesis follow this really powerful arc. You start with creation, and it's good. Then comes corruption, when humanity messes things up. That leads to destruction, the flood. But, and this is the critical part, it's followed by recreation, a chance to start all over again with Noah. And this new beginning is sealed with something called a covenant. Now, this is a super important concept. Think of it like a binding promise, symbolized by the rainbow, that God will never again destroy the world with a flood. This sets the foundation for everything that comes next. It's a brand new relationship. And that really brings us to our final thought. The slate was completely wiped clean. Humanity got a second chance through Noah. So what does it tell us about the nature of this story, and maybe about human nature? That this great reset was really only the beginning of a much, much longer journey.